23. Let's get Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio onto the show, where he is a regular with a weekly check-in, sometimes depending on the schedule. It happens on Monday, sometimes on Tuesday. So thank you definitely, LT, for giving us your time this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And happy belated Mother's Day, Sabrina.
Oh, thank you. How was your Mother's Day?
Well, I dropped off, or I had some donuts dropped off to my mom. My mom, I don't know if I should be, she's not, she kind of fell, so her mobility is a little challenged. But even though we're allowed to do gatherings, 10 people less, she's high comorbidity issues, and I just want to keep her safe from me. Yeah. Because since I see more people, it's kind of strange, but what can we say?
It's not really strange, Lieutenant Governor, because I think a lot of people feel that even though we are in PCOR 2 and there's been lifting of some of and relaxing some of the restrictions, a lot of people feel like, I'm just going to stay over here in PCOR 1.
Yeah, no, I think that it's safe. Actually, and that's what I really wanted to talk about today is this is a critical time. The next 2 weeks, now that the governor has released some restrictions, we're going to be tracking and monitoring and seeing whether or not the community spread will grow based on the people interacting, and hopefully if people wear their masks and continue to be smart and practice prevention measures on themselves, hopefully we can make more progress. But it is, I would say, the next week to 2 weeks, really close monitoring to see where we're at and to make sure that the medical response that we have is going to be adequate based on the numbers that may potentially come in. A lot of things in the air, but I'm confident that the medical response is going to be there. We just have to be very measured, since we were, prior to COVID, we already have a lot of sick people on the island that get regular medical care or require medical care.
Mm-hmm. Just for clarification on moving to PCOR 3, I know we just went into PCOR 2 on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Yesterday.
Yeah. So is it 28 days before we can officially go into PCOR 3 based on whether or not, we continue to hold down the 4 triggers?
Yes, but that doesn't mean that there can't be more things that open during the PCOR 2 posture that we're in. But yeah, that's generally speaking that is correct. And that has to do a lot with the amount of time that an infection can occur, bridge to amount of time that a hospitalization might occur, and keeping daily track on numbers in the hospital, and that kind of activity. Those are all key things that will be tracked all the time.
LT, I think we should get right into this issue of the hiring of the unclassified deputy director over at DISIT. What are you tracking on this situation, and what would your response be to it? I know we heard the response from the governor, but I think in our show this morning we kind of discounted her recollection of events. So, I mean, I don't know if you got that.
Okay, there's a deputy director had been in the works for quite some time, and I know that the governor and the director went and interviewed 3 candidates, all of them. Part of it is there's a significant amount of federal funds that for years have remained unexpended because of I guess I would say underperformance of the voc rehab side of DISIT. And so I think that the governor's movement is to try and push in additional resources into DISIT to try and expand services. And all of that was in transit. In fact, I think that Michelle Orr had already quit Department of Education, and then the COVID happened, and in transit to joining the agency. So that's pretty much the story on that.
So I know that Mr. Servino was mentioning that there were administrators that are federally funded for like the voc rehab and then one other division. Do you know if those vacancies were filled?
We've been trying to fill them for quite some time, and there are some gaps. There are some excellent candidates on island, but they might be lacking in one area. He had voc rehab administrator vacant during his entire tenure. In fact, I think he was utilizing part of those funds to pay for their in the administration. So it's been long time void, which is why I'm saying it's been a long time underperformer of returning Fed funds and really trying to get the gaps and increase the service. So if you're an individual with a disability, DISIT is there to try and understand how they could apply and put you in a good training program so that you're able, the goal is for you to get into the workforce. And everybody, depending on their disability and their mobility, has gaps. Part of it too is there's some nonprofits and companies that employ disabled folks that are sanctioned through a federal process that are working on base, like ICANN, for example. Those are the kind of processes that we'd like to see applied in Gov Guam to try and get people back. There's different things. Like I met with a group of, I would say about 20 individuals with that lack vision. They're blind, and they have been long complaining about, the connections to services. Some of them were sent in previous years to go and get training on mobility, but in an urban area. We live in a different setting, right? We don't have, unless you're going to be walking around in Agana, there are other challenges that blind people have, for example. So they exist to try and get people resources so that they can lead their lives independently as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like
but you can understand why people might be concerned that we're hiring during this COVID crisis, whether or not we forgot that, I spoke with this person and interviewed them last year or whenever it was.
What I'm saying is the deputy director of DISID, both the director and deputy were recruited from Department of Education. They're educators, they're experts in disabilities, and I feel strongly that this is positive for the individuals with disability, that community, because there have been a lack of professionals and attention for that population. So I would, I guess I'll say I'll fully go in and say that this is a critical position. In the height of a public health emergency, yes, it is a non-essential agency because everybody has been staying home. But now as we unveil services and we try and work towards the economic side of things, this is going to be an area that you need to spend time so people are not forgetting in the disability community.
Right, but they're not spending time at DISID because, like you said, it's a non-essential agency and it's closed. And what they're doing is they're over there at the PAC-STAR with a whole bunch of other government directors and deputy directors.
Making the salary and then also making the 15%, right?
Well, today portions of the government have restarted, and those services are things that are set to reopen and for activity to return.
So DISID is open?
They should be. There's a hotline, and DISID is one of the agencies now.
So the deputy director is going to be answering phones?
I'll find out. But I guess what I'm saying is a director and a deputy director, they're the first person to respond. Mm-hmm. And so I would just say, listen, this is an educator. This is not some political hack out there. It's somebody that is going to be beneficial for the community that department exists to protect and to advance.
Mm-hmm. What about this, the deputy position? I don't know if it was funded in the budget act. So was money moved around that could have been used to hire essential staff?
I think she's essential. Where the details of the transaction I'll have to get for you. Right. But I would say that this is an essential person.
Right. More essential than the other positions that aren't filled, LT?
I think that she's going to be leading in those areas. I mean, I'll get I'll do more digging and stuff, but I have to say I'm familiar with what the reason was for the need for assistance in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, even in behavioral health, where we focused attention, there's been very positive movement. We expect that this should be following suit.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to
kind of like that's a priority.
Right. Before you do that, Bree, can I just LT?
ahead.
So you were on the show, I think it was last week, but you had talked about the procurement that was being handled by the governor's legal counsel, and you had said that it raised red flags. Have you gotten any more new information on that process? And looking over the emails, my take on it is that the governor's legal counsel wasn't really familiar with how to procure stuff. So in reading the emails that we FOIA'd, it kind of seems like and I don't know if this is before or after or what the timeline of it, but that he had been reaching out to a lot of people saying, hey, can you help me, make all this right? So what is your take on that? And do you still stand by that? And then I guess what would be your response to it?
Well, I guess the question is, do I think that he could have been? How would you restate the question? You're kind of because
yeah. Let me just make it simple.
That experience, right?
So you had said that you were concerned that there were some red flags and what you knew about this. So has anything changed since you told us that?
No, I mean I think that was proper critique about what happened in this transaction, and since then, my expectation is that. The folks at all the people with the internal controls at Department of Administration, at the AG's office, at GSA, would continue to do their job, and then in this transaction, basically find a path to make sure that the promise, I guess, to the vendor, because the services have been rendered, are going to be made, and then they find the proper path for them to be compensated. And for the entire record to be available for review and all the times that it must be reviewed, including in the audit phase.
Mm-hmm.
What about the stuff with Linda? I mean, we just played, I know you're on hold. I don't know if you heard the clip.
I heard that.
I mean, it just seems a little off, her response, and that people keep asking her about it, and she seems to be sticking to her story that she doesn't recall the call. Do you recall the call?
I wasn't involved in the call, but she's the only one that would have, received the call. If she didn't recall, then she didn't recall. I would always continue to trust that with her.
Right. Can you recall, as a former GAR, if this was the process that was followed during an emergency situation? Is it the legal counsel that goes out and does procurement and negotiations? Or
I think the difference is that this is a public health emergency, and it looks like there is an emergency purchase that is being done. For the typhoons that I served in, we've had some disputes. I'll give you an example, debris. We did Paka, we did Chataan, we did Pang Sangwa, and each three, the big one was debris removal. And sometimes we would have problems. We contracted all out on Paka and Chataan, we did it all ourselves, or we assigned it to the Army Corps. Then Pang Sangwa, we did a combination because all three showed, there was some pressure, and there was also, I guess, some lessons to be learned because of the rate and the speed that the people expected the debris to be removed and then to be reduced, and I mean it can get complicated.
When you say we, though, who are you talking about? The civil defense?
Yeah, so for we during my time, it's we as civil defense, GSA, and the AG's office.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in this particular instance, it wouldn't be the same because it's a public health emergency, and there's all these special powers that are given to the public health authority that really.
I think that's one, and then the other thing is with the typhoon, it hits. You're not really sure what happens, but the debris. Sometimes people were mad because the debris took 3 weeks or a month to clear, and they were very mad. But when it was removed, they were fine. On this one, I think it's you made a decision to shut down basically inbound travel and quarantine everybody, and it's not, the schedules are firm with the airlines, and you need to act fast to try and put them into a quarantine. That's what I can observe in this situation.
Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, does the GAR have to sign off on all these contracts and MOUs?
Well, the GAR is going to be involved during the process in which you get a claim or you assert a claim for reimbursement from FEMA. That's when the GAR gets into the picture.
And this is something that we would have to go after for reimbursement. And
always, FEMA's always, the way the FEMA process is you push down some funds and then you ask for a reimbursement. And then based on what is approved and the severity of the amount, the default cost share is 75% feds, 25% local. Then it can escalate to 90-10, or in some of the big disasters in the past, 100% covered. But still, there had to be local capital outlay first before the feds came in. The feds don't normally act first. They wait because they're not able to mobilize as fast. So there's a little different stuff. Like, for example, Army Corps in typhoon disasters, they can get involved in debris management. Here, they're out there taking a look at alternate healthcare facilities and taking a look and seeing whether or not big gyms or hospital ballrooms can be taken online at a point when a crisis is escalated and they need to be there.
So having said that, and based on your experience as a GAR, and the way this was handled, do you see FEMA saying, you know what, it's cool, we're going to reimburse this whole show?
And are you guys still moving on that route, LT, or has there been a change from that direction?
I would never presume or predict how FEMA would react because there's always still a bit more in their review process that they'll have to take a look at. And then in terms of what are we tracking, I would say that we'd still be tracking. I'll probably talk to Lester, and the fiscal folks will be the ones to chart the course on which of the relief packages would you be able to access to pay for the expense, what's appropriate.
Who's the GAR now? I'm not sure if we...
Can I just say, guys, GAR is the governor's authorized representative. They signed on behalf of the governor, just in case people listening didn't know.
Right. And so the GAR now is John Calvo, and the alternate GAR now is Bertha Duenas.
Oh, what happened to Tim Uggan?
I believe that the governor made a decision. Let me verify, but as far as what I was tracking, it's based on taking a look at GAR being a fiduciary agent and wanting to make sure that we have the best folks forward that have that expertise.
Yeah, because I saw the documents, and it was Tony Babalta and it was Tim Uggan as the assistant
So in this
GAR.
phase, it's more appropriate, I think, for Bertha to get involved.
When was that changed?
I believe when we changed the GAR, when the new designation after Tony resigned. I haven't seen the signed form, but that's what my understanding was going to be the decision.
Okay, and all those documents went up to FEMA to co-sign.
Should be.
And I wanted to get back to this.
And I haven't seen those documents, but you guys, I'm a little late for my medical meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll make a quick...
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask about the government quarantine facility and all the directors and deputy directors that were assigned to the QFAC. Why couldn't the National Guard be assigned there when we are entitled to 100%, I don't know, reimbursement?
Well, I think National Guard is doing perimeter security, and it takes about... the National Guard and the way that gets approved, I think there was a beginning date, and I'll have to go back and see what the dates are because I don't think that the National Guard was authorized at that level at that time. I'll have to find out more details on that assignment.
Do you think though that was the right decision to put all these directors and deputy directors? I mean, you have almost the entire cabinet up there working. I mean, and DYA director and DYA deputy director, like, don't they have a correctional facility for youth to be running?
I'll have to find out, Bree.
It sounds like that wasn't really your call, LT.
No, it's not. But maybe what I'd say is those are the first people that will be able to be assigned immediately, understanding there's risk and not wanting to risk others. But I'll have to get more visibility on that.
And real quickly, the homeless situation.
Right,
I know
yeah.
people are asking about that. Has there been an alternate site, or are we gonna still have one?
No, it's still tracking. I'll get an update about that today. I know when I was in a meeting last Friday dealing with nurses, and I want to end about nurses, okay? But I saw Margaret Hattori, who is from EOG, who's in the Homeless Coalition, and she told me that they've been meeting and moving forward towards, doing getting the right response done. So I don't have details yet, but when I do, I'll share them with you for sure.
Last, LT, what about the double pay? The governor came down pretty firm on that, so we can't afford it. And I just feel like a lot of government employees know what they're supposed to be getting. So when you have the governor saying, why would you want double pay when we have a 25%? You're already getting the 25%. It's not really jiving well with a lot of them. So what would your message be to those government employees who are on the verge of filing a lawsuit because they're not getting the pay they believe they're entitled to?
Well, I first say that to the government employees that are out there, I would just want to first thank them for being out there and being the public servants that they are, the public service professionals. There is a dispute about this double pay and whether or not it was applicable during this period of time. This is a long period of emergency. A public health crisis is different than a typhoon. Recovery, there's a finite time for the end of a response and the beginning of recovery, and here it's happening at the same time. And so there are fiscal implications, and I just say that we're doing the best we can to give them proper compensation and to be very balanced, and understanding too that this is a critical time. But I just say thank you. And then the nurses, I'd like to thank them. It was Nurses Week last week. A lot of nurses out there doing excellent work, and I also want to thank them.
All right.
Okay, LT.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, thanks,
Lieutenant
guys.
Governor.
We'll see you.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
wash your hands.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, I would just say that if you want to thank the nurses, maybe give them the pay they're thinking that they should get.
They got roses, I saw. They delivered roses to the nurses.
They get any Godiva chocolate?
Oh, no.
There you go, Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. Again, a regular on the show. We try and bring him in every week. We've asked numerous times to get the governor, but there's something of a personality thing. I mean, that's all I could say it is, because
I don't know. I
mean,
like
it's
having
cool.
Josh
Yeah.
on. Thanks.
I mean,
Lieutenant
Josh,
Governor.
he'll answer the questions, which is cool. 8:45, we'll take a little bit of a break, and we're coming back with more of the KUAM news. Take over.